most folks know these familiar faces. Chris Garlock here with Michael Redmond. Michael has just flown in literally yesterday from Japan to the National Go Center to do a series. We're going to be doing this talk tonight and then doing streaming commentaries tomorrow at the tournament, and then back on Sunday. You should bring your games in, and we'll take a look at those as well. So we are here at the National Go Center. Team of folks spent last weekend building our. I believe I was surprised to find out. Michael told me that the Nihon Kin does not have a broadcast center.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
We don't have a broadcast. Well, there's a TV station, which is not the Nihon Kin. It's underneath the Nihon Kin. But we don't have a broadcasting station of our own.
But we do here at the National Go Center. So
impressive. Thanks
to the AGA and the National Go Center and the American Go E-Journal. So we're very excited about that, so we'll be inaugurating that maybe later tonight, depending on how things will go, certainly tomorrow. So what our plan is for tonight, how many folks here have seen some of the AlphaGo commentaries that Michael has done? How many have seen more than 5? All right. Who here has seen them all? Go ahead. All right, we got our hardcore fans here. Folks who are watching should know that there were torrential rains here earlier tonight, right on time here in D.C. So we're very happy to have you all here and braving that. The sandbags are down. We're good to go. So what we're going to do tonight is Michael is going to sprint through the entire game in 15 minutes. He wants to show you the whole game and give you basically the story of the game, the highlights of the game. So hold your questions, but once we get done with that, we're then going to move over to the board and start from the beginning, and then he will go into as many variations as you want until jet lag takes him down. More or less. Yeah.
So that's the story.
Or I call time.
You can call time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, you ready to roll?
Yeah.
I think we can now remove our EJ branding caps there. Yeah. All right. Good. All right. So, over to you, Michael.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is. I'm going to start with a human game actually, because there's this game that really resembles what AlphaGo did in the AlphaGo game. So the moves up to this point are not really relevant, but there's this shape that develops in the lower right corner, which is a joseki that was played a lot even when I was a young professional, or even when I was aspiring to be a professional. And there's this spectacular move that black plays, this attachment on top of the white stone there, in which black is making use of all sorts of forcing moves that black has against white's group on the lower side. So black has moves, for instance, I'm saying that black has moves like B and C, which are threatening, sort of making a kind of a loose connection with the stone at A, and stopping white from doing any kind of counterattack here. So white backs off, and when white does that, now it's better for black to actually cover there without playing any of those moves that black was threatening to play before. So the point here is that black is making use of all these forcing moves without actually putting them on the board, and that enables black to get a better shape when white does back away from the fight. And this was done by I have the name at the beginning. Let's go back to the it was Sekiyama Tada Sendayu. Sekiyama, I should remember that. He was a fairly well-known player at the time, and he was playing against Hoinbo Shusaku, who had white. And so it's the oldest record that I could find with that joseki. So this might have been the first game that had it. So it was a new joseki then. It lasted hundreds of years, and it was still played when I was a young pro. So now to get to the AlphaGo game, and you're going to see that move a very similar shape, and with exactly the same meaning. What I like about these master games, the AlphaGo master version playing against itself, is that in this version it's allowed to be very flexible in the opening moves it chooses. And so it can play 3-4 points or star points, it doesn't care. Whereas the later versions like Zero are much more limited in their choices. Maybe they have a better idea of what they want to play, but they're using a more limited number of moves in the beginning. And so it actually makes these master games even more interesting to me. That's why I'm doing a lot of them.
Even more interesting than they already were.
Right, yeah. And so we have this 3-3 invasion, which looked really strange at first, but now we're getting used to it. And in my earlier commentaries of this series, I did a lot of talk about how this 3-3 invasion is working. But so in this SGF file, I'm not really going into it very much. It's sort of typical of AlphaGo that it does the second invasion there after the first one. And there's some connection there that professional players haven't really completely understood yet. But when black does that, it looks good for white to be doing this double hane, because when this joseki, which most players will probably know this joseki, the hane at A that white has played already, that move at A is reducing black's profit on the upper side. So it's making that ponuki there, that capturing shape, not as effective as it should be. So I like that for white. And then black plays this move, which is not seen in any of the zero games. It's sort of unique to master. And black is trying to build a moyo on the lower right quarter of the board, you might say. And this is where white plays this attachment, which you might recognize from the other game. And again, white is making use of the pressing move at A, which white doesn't want to play yet. But white has that at any point to play, like, and I'll show you variations later. I was sort of tempted to do it right now.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
Very good restraint.
Yeah, and when this happens, and white has established strength in the center, now black has to go back to the left side because that black group on the left side is in danger of being pincered. And we get the third 3-3 invasion. But this is actually one that humans would have played even before AlphaGo, so because it sort of makes sense that white has played all the forcing moves from above. It's a good time for white to jump into the 3-2 point. And the joseki shapes we're getting here are, all of these were made after AlphaGo. So, like, humans will play this version of the joseki. And the upper right corner, leaving it at that point is something that top players do now. And so white's follow-up is this move. And this 55 is just something that AlphaGo always does. It's a forcing move. It doesn't have any local loss. And sometimes it works really well because black is establishing various forcing moves from the side or from above. And in some very, very rare cases, it's not forcing anymore when something really drastic happens to the game. So it's interesting that AlphaGo always wants to play this exchange at some point. Just as soon as it has kind of a calm point in the game, it's going to play that exchange. Whereas a human player would want to keep that extra co-thread just to be on the safe side. And there's this spectacular move, and this looks like something that I would like to be able to find in my own games. It's a very human-like move, and there's a reason for it because black has not decided what to do in the lower right corner, and so it depends a lot on whether white's going to save that one stone. So once white plays here to save that one white stone, it's okay. So I did it with the letters at this point. I marked the board up. When black plays A and white plays B, white has saved the stone of D. That produces the value of the lower side. So black can play this exchange in the lower right corner, and this really sort of destroys a lot of what black's potential on the right side. But since black has that exchange in the center, the positive value of black towards the center and the right side is more valuable now because the lower side is going to be trashed now, but it's being destroyed 2 times basically. White's destroying it is sort of redundant, that white has come from above as well as from underneath. And white plays this to stop an attack on white. White's whole group there was in a bit of danger of getting attacked, and black plays this move, which makes sense again. Black really needed a stone somewhere on the third line to make that territory work to a certain degree. Otherwise, white would just jump in. And also, this move is helping black close off the side, which we'll see in the actual. And white jumps in. So this is where the game gets really exciting, and I'll be talking about variations there. And black is still looking at possibilities to attack white by pushing through at 8 here, and white connects with that move. And then we have this fight in the center where white is refusing to connect very solidly, and black is taking advantage of that, and it leads to this little trade here where white is capturing the cutting stone there, and black is getting a bigger moyo, but white is going to get some territory on the side to make up for it. And white has gotten rid of the potential cut at A also, so that's important. And now black is building on the center. This is a really spectacular move. And we can talk about how it works. You know, I'm always tempted to go into variations, but let's leave that for the big board. You can see how this black stone on the third line is helping black cover the side there too. And now white starts to invade the center. And all the time, this is a very close game. I can study it and see that it's very close. I don't know this is a half point, but AlphaGo is usually, it ends in a half point. And I can't find any mistakes. So I would assume that this could be a half point difference already. But it's just too difficult for a human to calculate. Or at least AlphaGo thinks it's very close. And this is a big move. But white's move at A and exchanging for B already was a slight gain for white when black does make this territory. And I'll be talking about that. And this actually turns out to be the right point for white to invade black's territory. And it's really crazy, but I'll show you how it works. And white reduces black's territory here. And looks like we're going to have an end game, but you know,
it's going to be peaceful, right?
It's going to be peaceful.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is where I sort of calm down and say it's going to be end game here. And so this is the final big move. And it looks like that right side is going to be black's territory. All the white territories are pretty decided. And this is where it all turns around. Because when white plays, and it already is, it's an extremely close game. I would assume it could easily be a half point difference. Like when I tried to figure out the end game, it became very, very, very close. And I couldn't really decide. So I would assume white would want to answer this move because black has a cut there on the third line. White tries to play a forcing move first. And so if black answers that, white's going to get a small gain. Black doesn't answer it. White has to answer that move. But when black takes the stone, now if white answers that, black has gained a few points there. But it's very important because it also will help black cut white off in the center later. So white ignores it. And now if black answers at A, white will eventually answer at B. So they're both sort of bluffing each other, but there's a logic to it also. And so now white's going to trash the whole right side. And it's going to make trouble for black, because black has to deal with these stones that black has in the center. And that black group on the upper side is going to be getting into trouble, and it gets really exciting. And you were thinking that you might have been thinking that they were going to end the game in an end game. Black has to go after that one stone, and I'll show how it's going to be difficult for white to save it. But white can save these stones. And so this is a move that's really neat. It's threatening the cut at A and the cut at B and the cut at C. So there's a lot of cutting points that black has to deal with. So black just connects there. And so that's good enough for black right now. And now white starts to attack black in the center. White has to do something to save that marked group there in the center. So white's trying to establish a connection a little bit, but also is thinking of potential attacks on the right side. Black pauses in the fighting just a little bit just to capture the left side group there, and cuts here. So this is, I'll show you what happens if white escapes with the one stone. It's not really very good for white to escape there. And this is another spectacular move that is forcing that and then making a connection here. And white can't really cut at A because black would just push through. So white plays here. Now white's revived the threat of cutting the one stone off. So white's getting close to connecting in the center, but it's not connected yet. And black finishes that territory. And you can see white's trying to play some endgame moves first. And now black has cut white off. And white counterattacks a little bit. And I'll show you what happens if black covers. Black couldn't cover just then. And now white's attacking that marked group on the right. It's not 100% alive. Yeah. And there's that problem with the black is cut off at A also. So black has to add a stone there. And now black's okay. So black's alive on the right side. If white cuts, black can just play some random move there and it's going to be alive. And actually white is starting to make ice too. But first white plays this exchange, which is really important. It's going to set up an endgame sequence starting at C next. So that's really neat. And white has this forcing move. And now white has two eyes. So that fixed that group. Black plays the biggest endgame move. Now white cuts black off, and we see that black will eventually have to put a stone in at A to have a living shape. So this this exchange here in the center was just adding momentum to that little attack, this little attack that white's setting up, and forcing that. That's something like a 1-point move that black was just forced to play. And now finally black starts this ko. And like when you have a ko like this, and there's going to be like one difference, one ko threat difference. And it's really tricky. Usually a human game they would be running out of time at this point, and no one would really know exactly what's going to happen. But it seems that AlphaGo knows. Black plays this move at A, which loses about 2 points, but it's setting up a lot of ko threats for black. So black needed to do that to win the ko. And so we have the ko fight. And both sides are, after that first ko threat by black, both sides are playing ko threats that don't lose any points. And finally, we have this trade, which really makes sense. And it's a great example of endgame play in this game, because the endgame is just about well, obviously it's perfect, it's AlphaGo, but it's perfect, and it's a pretty difficult endgame. So it's something that if you want to study the endgame, it's worth. That exchange that white did, that little Atari there, makes this much more effective because it's a seki-like shape. Black needed to add that one move there. And now white switches to this move, which is the final big move. It's a bit more than 6 points. Usually that's just a 6-point move, but I can talk about why it's a bit bigger. And then white plays this forcing move. And you can, now this is where AlphaGo gets a bit crazy. It wastes a ko threat. Yeah. And there's going to be some final ko's, and black's going to lose by 1/4 of a stone. That's a half point. So a human player would be really upset to be playing this kind of move. But it turns out, even if black doesn't play that, black's going to lose by 1/4 of a point. So it doesn't matter to AlphaGo. It matters to me.
AlphaGo doesn't give a you-know-what.
Yeah. It just likes to, it's teasing me.
Right.
Yeah. And so we have a seki there. And the moves are being played in the correct order. Like it's pretty clear cut, but if you want to study the end game, you get to count the size of each move, and you'll be able to see that AlphaGo is doing it in the correct order, which is unusual. But like this was really a half-point difference to start with. So AlphaGo is being forced, you might say, to play the correct moves, because if it's winning by more than half a point, then it will just give away points. It doesn't care. Again. But it's not actually giving away points as far as I can know. Again, black has lost a ko threat with 83. People can figure out how black could have limited that to 2 ko threats instead of the 3 that white has locally now. And the game looks like we're about to come to the end. But of course, AlphaGo likes to resign just before the game ends. So this is where black resigned. And we have, like, I sort of marked the moves that are left for the game. Like, black will take at A, and black will take at C. And then you'll have 2 ko's there, only one of which black can connect. And then they'll fight the ko, and black cannot win the ko. And if you subtract the ko threats that black lost in the end game, even then black cannot win the ko. So black's going to lose by half a point.
But you would all counted that, right, Keith?
Yeah. It's a lot of calculation. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give Michael a big round of applause for that. That was cool for us. It's sort of a two-way street. You get to actually, if you're watching our videos, we read the comments, but you get the comments, and then we actually don't respond to the comments. But this is your chance to actually ask questions, but it's also a chance for us to interact with folks. So we want you to do that. So
I can start?
Off to the races.
I was waiting.
Okay.
So yeah, as I was saying, it's very good that the more modern programs almost always play star points now. So they're really strong, but it must be more efficient to have them very limited in the number of choices they can make in the opening. And since I think that even the AIs, the computer programs, are still sort of guessing as to what the best moves are. And they say they're getting gradually stronger and stronger. So they're still making progress, even though they're stronger than humans. It means that they have potential to change. And they are sort of drifting away from what humans play. So they're doing different things now. So it's sort of disappointing they're playing all star points, but that could change at some point. And so one of the things I like about AlphaGo is that, especially in this master version, when it's playing against itself, it was allowed a lot of leeway as to what it could play. Or maybe they just chose those games, but we're seeing a lot of variety.
Probably the latter.
And so black plays this. Nowadays, almost every program says that this is a really good move almost all the time. And so you see a lot of people just playing here. So actually, AIs have made choosing joseki fairly easy because there's a kind of a limited number of joseki that they like to play. And so if you're learning from an AI, you don't have to learn long sequences of moves, except for a few of the fun? When you play a simple joseki, basically it just makes the game a lot more complicated later on, because you have to fill those open spaces in the middle game.
Right.
Yeah. So white just jumps into the 3-3 point. This is sort of typical of Master already. And when Master played the humans, we were really surprised to find invasions like this. They weren't this early though; they were later at that point. It hadn't proceeded to this point yet. Like the earliest invasion was move 19, I think.
That's right.
That's sort of my example of one of the new things that AlphaGo was doing there. But even those invasions really surprised us a great deal. We were sort of blown off by seeing that happen. And then it became the normal thing now. It's what humans do, too. And so this is, just to go over this joseki here, when black plays this variation instead of the old one, which was pretty uniform, this one, black doesn't really have any chance to play away in this variation. So black will play here. And when there's no stone on the side, white will always roll again now. Just because playing this hanetsugi here, it gives black such a great shape on the side. So I don't really know what the standard move is here, but there's some move on. I would probably play somewhere in the middle of the side. But I know AlphaGo likes to keep this distance from the wall, so it would want to be somewhere around here so it can make an attack on the wall. But this would work also. It's what we tell players to do. You have to have room to extend on one side or the other. But the virtue of playing this knight's move, and then white almost always plays this way, is that black has this chance to choose various joseki variants or to play away. And in the early opening, it works pretty well to be playing away. But we'll see. In this corner, we'll see one of the variants. So I'll stop there. Black jumps into the 3-3 point, and like this is just something that Master does. AlphaGo does it, and a lot of programs do this kind of stuff. I think I would still want to play this kakari, and like it's a position where jumping into the 3-3 point gives you about an even game, and playing this kakari will give you about an even game also. So I think from the human viewpoint, I still think I can just play whichever move I feel more comfortable with.
It's just a choice.
And if I'm comfortable with the move, I'm going to be playing better later in the game. So if I'm playing a move that I don't feel comfortable with, then maybe even if I get a lead, according to the computer, I'm probably not going to be able to keep it. So that's how I rationalize my not really playing a lot of the computer moves. So white plays the double hane here. It's really good. Well, of course, white could have copied black. And there's probably nothing wrong with this. White would probably play the next move somewhere around here. There'd be nothing wrong with this. But there's a kind of a logic in white playing the double hane here. Because this is a joseki, so it's roughly even. I think people would usually say that this early in the game, it's supposed to be, in many cases, it would be a slight advantage for black. Because white's getting the corner, but black's getting this ponnuki. But this is a case where the value of that ponnuki, this capture here, is reduced a lot by white's position here, which is coming into the upper side, reducing the possibility of black territory here. So this makes sense for white. Mm-hmm. And black plays the pincer here. But you can see that black is taking Sente with every joseki. So black is trying to control as much of the board as possible. Very similar to the strategy that Master Go was playing when it played the humans. I mean, Master, yeah. So at this point, like this kind of move would be a natural move. And the most common joseki now would be black curling once, jumping. And then there would be black looking at this vital point in white's shape. Like if white connects against this, the one thing that's good about doing it on a board is I get to play 2 moves in a row when I want to.
Yeah.
The program
can't do that
let me
online.
do. I have to choose the point to put
We
a
can
white
get Anders to
something.
rewrite it so you can do that.
Yeah. So this would be it. But then if white plays something like this, then white does kind of have a very cramped shape. Black would be able to push here. And would still have room to slide in the corner. Maybe black would even just do something with the
Slide
side.
on both sides there.
Yeah. And so white's in a kind of a small space there. And so instead, white plays here. So this is a really neat move. And you can see it does resemble that move in the game that I was showing you, Shusaku. Sekiyama Sendai. Yeah, I keep forgetting that name for some reason. And if black plays here, we can have white play here. And, you know, I could get into a very confusing variation if I had black push through and cut.
Does anybody want to see that?
I don't want to do it, though. So I'm going to avoid that
Doesn't
one.
matter if you do want to see it.
It's really confusing.
Okay.
And in this case, you can see extending here has become a bad move. This is where
it's
black
just
would rather
running.
to play a hane or something and get a good shape on this side. This is just, it's a perfect shape for white because either way, whichever way black pushes through, white has a connected shape. And black has to do something to strengthen these stones. So that's the whole point behind this move.
Was the attachment Shusaku or Sendai?
Sendai was the one who played the. It could have been a new move played by him. But he was the one who played it. But of course, Shusaku won the game. He was already the Atome. He was going to be the next Swing Bull at that point. And he was probably, well, he took black against Shua, but people think that he was just being polite. And he could have been the strongest player in Japan at that point. So white plays here and black pulls back, and then white pulls back. So now, by omitting that trade there, white has left the potential to pincer black here, which would be very effective. Yeah. So black has to play. Black still wants to look at the cut here, so black doesn't really want to play a low move like this, in which case white would be able to play the one forcing move, and would not bother to play the shape move here, but would switch to the center. So this would be very high pace for white, would be a quick development. So black plays here, trying to keep some pressure on white, and that's why white is just playing a lot of moves here towards the center to make these stones strong enough so that white can be taking a kind of an attacking pose here. So this way. And next, if black answers something like, it's actually hard to choose the move. It could be something like this. Then white gets to pincer here. And black would be able to live, but it would allow white to do a little attacking and get a big side here.
It's just going to be alive, that's it.
It's going to be alive, yeah. Black still has the sliding move in the corner, so it's not going to die. So this happens. It's a balanced sequence, I guess. And in this case, it really makes sense for white to be jumping into the 3-3 point, because there's plenty of room for the time being for white to go into the side. White didn't do that, but there's plenty of room. And the 3-3 point is a lot of territory. And when you've reduced from above like this, it's very effective. And people have known that it's very effective for hundreds of years. So it's not really that unusual. Like this 3-3 and that 3-3 were things that would not have been played by humans before AlphaGo. But this one would have been played. Black covers here. And now we get this variation. I can talk about variations here, I guess, if people can see. This is where black played a relatively unusual variation. Because, well, for one move, this would be, in many cases, it can be an even result. But in this case, it's not so effective when the side is limited already. And so this would be less than satisfying. And when black doesn't want to play this variation, which, like in the beginning, it would have been perfectly even. But AlphaGo doesn't like to play it anyway because it ends in gote with black. So the other move that black can try to play would almost always be this one. So black starts with the hane here, and for the time being, it's really big if black gets another move here. So white's going to answer that. And then black has two choices. So like if black plays the double hane, then obviously, when I say obviously, I should probably go into the very white cannot capture this stone because black can get 3 stones. So that would be bad for white. It would just be too much of a loss towards the corner. So white can't do that. So since white cannot cut on this side, white's probably going to put a cut in here and capture the 1 stone. So this is something that black could have done. But then black has to go after this stone. And so black needs to spend a move here. Looks like the ladder is going to favor black, actually. But let's take a look. Yeah, it favors black. Yeah, but white would have a forcing move here, which would have a follow-up move here. So this is an example of 2 moves that white could play as a ladder break. So black did not do it that way, but instead played the other move that is very popular, which is cutting here. And in this case, I think cutting here is actually a lot more effective. And so white has to choose, again, white cannot move in this direction because white's going to lose the corner. So usually in a position like we have over here in the beginning of the game, white would have played this way. But then black gets to squeeze here and play. And captures. And this is the Joseki sequence that is being played a lot. And so locally this would be the Joseki. But white's not really gaining very much because white is trashing the black territory in an area that was already reduced from above. So the direction of play for white is not so good. And white is not 100% alive yet because black can later, when black does something like this and something like this, white's going to have to connect up here, and all these nice moves are potential danger for white. And there's even a cut point here, so it's not a settled group though. And it's not attacking black on the left here. So white didn't do that, and instead played a relatively peaceful move. But this is also a variation that is seen a lot in professional Go. Black plays here, and if white takes, you can expect black to play some kind of a connection. Like in this game, the cut here is not really a big threat, so black would probably connect on this side. You want to connect the place where you definitely do not want to get cut, because otherwise if you play, usually you want to connect all your stones. So these would be the important stones, and this would be the one that, like, if things get complicated here, then in some cases it would be affordable for black to. So this would be the normal way to play. Definitely not this stone. You don't want to save that stone. But in this case, black is already pretty okay on this side, and so you can probably afford to play the connection on this side. Because black's trying to build something on this side. So having forcing moves in this area is going to be damaging to the side here.
Okay, let's just pause for a second.
It's an unusual case.
Questions at this point? I'm assuming everybody's, okay, all right, you're all good, all right.
One quick question.
Yes, Hesman.
Q7 connecting both is bad because it can be peeped at, obviously, but
He's talking about the, he's talking about.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about this.
Well, actually, you see, AIs play that sometimes, and the point is that it can be peeped from both sides, but the second time, black's not going to. Yeah.
so why isn't that a better move?
In some cases, it's an okay move, but the point is that white gets to choose which side to peep from, and in this case, white would be choosing from this side. And as I was saying, after playing this peep, the chance of black answering this is very low. The likelihood that black will be forced to answer that is very low because it's not going to come with tempo. It's not going to be coming with Sente. So it's a very unusual case that white would be able to play both peeps. So this actually works, but there is.
It looks scary, but it's not.
It's not as bad as it might look. You can see this played by AIs in some cases. But in this case, I wouldn't like it still because I think white wants to do something on the right side. So white left it at this point. And let's see, white played this move. Yeah, I'm still remembering the moves. I have the game out on my cell phone, so I can peep if I get into trouble. So this is where black.
And black descends upper left and then corner.
Oh yeah, black threw in the black threw had that.
I keep forgetting that move. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I already talked about that. And so, so if white could have played something on the outside, actually. There's nothing wrong with that. But in that case, the point is that black would not have played this exchange, which really reduces the side. Like this exchange here, it gives white, in some cases it gives white the cut here with the ladder favorable, or at the very least white is going to have to clamp here. So it sort of takes away all of black's potential territory. So in this case, there's a good chance that black would be just doing something like this and getting some extra territory here. And in some cases actually connecting from this side. So getting more territory here. But the moment white saves this stone, the value of this whole area has gone down because it's not going to get big. So black can play here. So this is really a beautiful order of moves, which is very accurate. So I find it to be beautiful. And then black jumps here. And so in this case, there's various ways black can continue next. For instance, black could play here to attack the whole white group. Or otherwise, black could just push through here. And white can live in the corner. White needs one move here. And then black could play something from the center, something like this, for instance. So black has a potential attack here. So that could be pretty good for black, actually. So white avoids that by playing this first. And then black plays here. So this was an area where white could have played something like this on the side. And it would have been relatively easy for white to live. White might come one closer to the wall. Yeah. And white has a forcing move here. And actually, black's not very strong. Black's not alive in the wall. So white gets a kind of a temporary base here, which is not safe in itself. But there's the potential cut here, and a lot of space here for white to work with. In actual practice, it's going to be okay for white. Yeah.
How many people would feel comfortable just parachuting in there?
Yeah.
Other than Edward.
So black
not even Edward.
And then white jumps in anyway, like white came in here. So this is looking at the connection here towards the center and the cut here. And so black answers here. And now white's looking at the wedge here. White cuts once, and you can see the whole black group here is getting into a bit of Dame-Murray. So black adds a stone. And white plays this one. So this is really interesting move. You can go ahead of me. You like just put 100 moves out. Yeah. And this move is a point where I think some people would be sort of tempted to play an Atari here. But black's not going to connect. Black's going to play like this, for instance. And it's going to be a ko, which is actually, since the corner's very strong already, it's a one-sided ko. It's a Hanami ko for black. Because the damage to the side is going to be limited. So black would be able to play moves like this, or moves like this, for instance, which are valid ko threads. And the ko, obviously, if black wins the ko, this whole area is going to be just a big black territory. And it's going to be good algae because this cutting stone is going to be an Atari. So there's going to be no problem with the trouble. These three black stones had a kind of a weak shape, but that's going to be solved. And everything's going to be sort of connected. So winning the ko is big for black. Winning for the ko for white is a relatively limited amount of territory. Like at some point, black can still do something like this to surround this area anyway. So it's just a little territory here. So the white's gain is actually pretty limited in this ko. And there's a lot of ko threads that black can use to punish white. Like, for instance, this would be a ko thread that black could play in some cases. And black's not going to use these unless something really serious happens. So for this ko, black's not going to use moves like this, which would lose several points. Black could use moves like this, which was played in the game anyway. This is limiting white's space here and threatening to push through and cut here. So white plays this move. And white's play here is really interesting because white's not worrying about getting cut off here. It's a computer program, so it's obviously not worrying. But you know, it's not dealing with that. But it would be actually bad for white to be too careful about connecting. So like this, I believe. Oh no, white played this one. Sorry. And so when black plays here, this is obviously threatening to cut white with this stone, this move. That's obvious. Also, it's making eyes for black. For the time being, like even if we get a very strong white shape here, there's a potential eye with this move, and it's pretty hard for white to take away this eye too. So for the time being, it's already alive. In actual practice, black would play under, just adding a stone to get rid of all those forcing moves. And white actually has a very heavy shape when white connects like this. So white doesn't want to do that. And so white plays this move, enticing black to play this move again, which is, it's the key point, it's the vital point to destroy white's shape, because if white answers simply like this, now instead of playing this move that I was talking about earlier, black gets to push through and pull back, and now black has eyes all over the place. Because if black gets into trouble, black can just play one Atari here, and then return to this side. So fixing two problems with one blow, and getting an eye here, two eyes. And white has all these cutting points that white has to deal with before white can start attacking here. And black has some eye space here too, so it's going to be very difficult for white to have any attack on this black group. And white's whole group here is so weak and doesn't have any eye shape at all. So that's why this is looking like a really good move. And white counters with the peep here, which would allow white to capture this black stone, making a completely different story. This would be good for white. It is captured already. And then, of course, then white still has the option of squeezing black a little bit here. It wouldn't, obviously it would not die, of course, but there would be a lot of squeezing. So black pushes through, and we get this trade. And this is an even trade. Again, you know, AlphaGo does all these wild trades, and they're always even. And so we get this shape. I think I put those moves in the wrong order, and white plays here. And so this is a point where if black connects, it's sort of fun. White actually has a number of ways to punish black for this. But the easiest way is to fill a liberty and just capture these four stones. Because if black runs away, are you seeing this happen? Cut here. Yeah. And this is a snapback. So black plays Atari. White can just capture the whole thing. And it's really interesting that white has just enough liberties on all sides. Like if black cuts here, again, white is winning by one move. So it's just a one move difference. But that's good enough, obviously. But actually, white could have won some stones by playing something softer like this, but it wouldn't be as convincing.
Or as clever.
It wouldn't be, yeah, of course. So so black doesn't connect there, and instead black, did black push through here? No, black connected, yeah. And white captured the one stone, and black played here. So that was another even trade, and like at this point it looks like white's just played a lot of dominant points, sort of. But white gets the bonus of playing here. You don't need to look so worried.
All right.
I'm
just like AlphaGo. I'm not worried.
And so white captures these stones, so that makes this whole group living, and so white will never have to worry about the cut there. And it's a sizable territory. It's 16 points here alone. And there's a bonus that we're going to see on the lower side. So I think black played this one. Actually, I do know. I think I need to know when white played this. So there was an
White plays H2.
H2. H2.
You can see up here.
H2.
Did you get 100?
That's white.
That's white for the.
Black's still F16s.
That's white for the next move. So white didn't do this one. White did this now. Yeah.
H2.
Now this was sort of spaced, but this move in itself is threatening a semi-eye. And people are sort of really intimidated by semi-eyes because they're a fight to capture. And especially when you have a lot of stones there, you don't really know who's going to win. But actually, I'm going to say that it's simple. Because all you have to do is count the number of moves.
Anybody want to write that down? Just.
And it's pretty obvious that black has only four liberties, right? That's the simple part. Now, the number of liberties white has, in this case, it's not so simple. Because it's relatively easy if black plays this way and extends. The obvious looking move. Pretty intuitive. In this case, white's going to have 5 liberties. So if you can envision this, so you know that one is correct. The problem comes when black plays one of these moves on the second line. If we look at this, it looks like white has 3 liberties. Black has 4. And the same with this one. But this is actually a position where black is going to run out of pushing moves. So let's just play that one out. And at this point, black runs out of moves. Black can't push from either side. And so actually, it's an unusual case in which even if black plays away from the white stones, white's going to continue here locally. Instead of going for the semi, which white would lose by 1 move, white's going to continue here and head for this shape. And this actually it increases white's liberties. And the same would happen if black had simply taken it. It would be the same story. This would give white, this 1 liberty here has turned into 2 liberties because it's going to take black 2 moves to come in here. So like, if we assume something like this, actually black's going to throw it in that way. Let's do it this way. Yeah. If we assume something like this, there was a kind of a code that I'm not talking about, but it's not a direct code. So yeah, but white is winning by 1 move in this case. And so, let's see. So black cannot answer that on that side. So obviously that's a big bonus for white, because white can connect underneath here at any point. And white didn't do that right away. I think white jumped in here first. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah.
And now white plays this move. Now this is really an exquisite move.
Wow.
You wouldn't think to play that. Okay, so the basic position here, the problem here that white has, is that we have some move in the center. The move that white chose later in the game was this one. We have this move in the center, and even a top pro would not really be able to attach a value to this move. It's somewhere more than 20 points. But you know, we don't even know where black. Okay, I'm missing a move here. I should
99,
99,
F16.
yeah. So 98.
99 F16.
Oh yeah, I played twice with white. So white cut here and black pushed here, and then white played this, and then white jumped in here. Yeah, and so now it's white's turn. So playing another move in the center is big, but also connecting under here is. I put the exact amount in the Go file. Actually, it's more than 20 points. It's a really big move, and when white does this, white has the bonus of being able to play here next, and black is going to extend. White connects, and black takes here. So black has an eye here. That's not a real eye, but black has an eye here. So black has 2 eyes, and white's going to get all this territory on the side. So it's going to be something like this. And so that's a pretty big move. So, when white plays here, the size of this move is going to decrease or increase depending on how black answers. So for instance, if black answers here, and white plays here, then obviously black will play somewhere in the center. White plays here. Black plays here. White plays here. Black plays here. Black has an eye here. At any point, if black plays an Atari here, white's going to start a call. And this call is going to, black's life is going to depend on it. because after white finishes the code, black has to come back and live. So it's a code that black cannot really win very easily. And so even in the end game, when black starts this go, there's a high possibility that black's going to have to back up and disconnect here. And that is most of the extra value. It adds 2 or 3 points to the size. Obviously, it's a code, depends on the code threats and everything. But it's a 2 or 3 difference gain for white that adds to the size of this move when black answers this way. So it's a probe that white's just done. It's a probe. Again, if black plays on the outside, we get back to the same race to capture, which white wins by 1 move. So black has to answer somewhere. If black answers here, then white's going to play this one, and white's going to get an extra 2 or 3 points. So in the game, black plays this way. And the point is that this move, and well, this is the move that AlphaGo chose. I have trouble choosing where to play, actually. But this move and this move are about equal in value. So white played this exchange to change the value. And if black had played here, white would have played this one. When black played here in the game, the value is decreased because black can still play here. And for the time being, white's going to leave it. But by the time white plays here, when white plays here, this is going to be the biggest move on the board. So at some point, white's going to be able to play that exchange. It's much more likely than assuming that black might play here. This is never going to be a Sente move. So a very high possibility we're going to end up with this. And then white will be able to get a squeeze here. So there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And then if white plays the honey here, we have the squeeze. So that's the extra potential. It's about a 2-point gain for white. Because it's usually would expect white to be playing all these forcing moves. And so it's the difference between, if black plays here actually, black has added a move, but it's maybe one move, I think it's a 1-point gain for black, just because black gets this extra yosei here. But it's a much larger gain for white when white plays this. So it evens out to something like 2 or 3 points gain for white, compared to not doing anything.
But even with that explained, I mean, it just seems, this just feels...
The center seems so urgent.
Right, thank you.
And it's really difficult to calculate it. That's the point. It's so difficult to calculate. Yes?
Question.
Well, if I'm following correctly, the fact that you know how much of a difference there is between the 2 moves white had at the bottom, does that allow us to infer what the value of this move is?
Yeah, well, since this is over 20 points, and I think it was 21 points if white had just played it. And so playing this exchange, if black had taken that, it boosts the size to something like 24 points. So I think it's probably pretty, if we assume that AlphaGo was correct, which is probably a pretty safe assumption, it means that this move is equal to something between 21 and 24 points. Because white's going to play this side if it's just a 21-point move. But it's going to play this side if it's a 24-point. And this move, it's a move that a human player would be very proud of playing, but it's the kind of thing that professionals think about. We try to play a forcing move, probe. Please.
One thing I'm kind of noticing is AlphaGo has the next move in mind, like down like maybe 10 or 15 moves on the line. It has other sequences it wants to try to like aim for. So could it also be that the center move aims for other sequences later in the game that's more useful to it, that it feels the other side?
Well, I don't know how far it actually reads in the way that human players read. It does have sequences out into the future, but I think I don't know to what degree it actually stored them for its future references. I think to a certain degree, it might have been doing the same thing every time. But I'm not knowledgeable about the neural network systems enough to tell you, really.
But we will be once Demis sends you your copy.
Oh, you think so? Yeah.
He makes sure to mention that in every video, just in case Demis or his people are watching.
Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned about G2 has huge value. The second line G2.
G2.
Yeah.
This one, yeah.
And then, but in the we'll take the.
Oh yeah.
For amateur play, for example, a Dan player. But there's still, many other spots seem to be pretty big. So how do we evaluate?
Okay, there's a kind of a rule of thumb.
Yes.
Well, when you have a move like this, which you can calculate. If you're a strong player, maybe you can calculate that it's somewhere around 20 points. It takes a lot of effort probably to calculate the exact value, but you can probably see this about 20 points. And you know that's a really big move. And then you see this move in the center, and you don't know how big that is. And so there's two ways to go about it. When you're just, you have to do a kind of an educated guess here, because it's not a position which is humanly calculate possible. So first of all, if you think that you have a winning game, like usually, even if a pro is playing, there's going to be a side who's ahead. So if you think you have a winning game, then it's quite often a good idea to get rid of the undecided shapes as quickly as possible. You want to simplify things so that you can handle the end game and you can turn it into a game in which you're not likely to make any mistakes. So this is an issue that is very, very different from what computers have. Actually, in the games against human players, I was seeing AlphaGo doing something very similar that was seemed to be working in the same way. But I don't think that AlphaGo was trying to simplify it. It was just playing moves that had the least possibility of the opponent winning. Right. But the effect was quite similar to what a top pro would be doing to simplify the game in the late middle game. So this move would give white more potential to sort of fix the shape in the center and simplify the game. Now, because, yeah, well, black's going to play this move, and like it happened in the game, we got to a point where the game looked like it would be a
we get to several points,
straightforward endgame. You have to be confident that it's not going to get killed, yes.
Right.
Yeah, I know that.
Obviously, you know, and I've had the experience since I was far weaker, that even when I can't find the move, when a pro or an AI plays the move, it becomes, usually it's instantly understandable. Of course that makes sense, and you start seeing things. And this stuff at the bottom was difficult, but with your explanation, but that just seems so deep. It doesn't seem to have a direct way out anywhere. You say you have to have confidence that's going to live. I don't got it.
Well, that's the point. Well, like, you have to play a move that you think you can handle later on. You have to be able to handle the following moves. If you don't think that's going to live, it's perfectly okay to play something like this. If you're worried about the center, you could play something like this, for instance. Like, you have to play a move that you feel comfortable with, and then you're going to be able to follow up on it. So I can sort of, I can't spell it out for you, because I don't have all the diagrams in my mind either. And I would be worried, but I would choose this move by judging the whole board position. And I would say, I don't know if it's going to live or die maybe, but it's sort of borderline for me. And then I have to go this far in to be able to win the game, then I'm going to do it.
Because this is just not good enough.
That's an interesting point. It's not what I was trying to answer, which is, if we assume that black is going to play this move, then white will have an opportunity to fix the shape and simplify the game, which we're going to see happening in this game. And it looked like it was simplified, but it was, since it was very, very, very close, AlphaGo made it complicated again.
But I think this raises a question which has come up again and again for us in looking at these AI games, which is when you've got this thing that has such incredibly deep reading power, and I don't know that, other than the programmers.
It's coming up with solutions that are not always practical for humans.
Right.
Yeah. So it's actually, in the opening, it has less certainty that it's playing the best moves. So it's playing, in a way, it's playing moves that have a high possibility of winning. And so it's playing more moves that are more easy for us to imitate.
But I feel like, first of all, you yourself, a pro would play this move. So this is not...
A pro would play that move. Like I would probably see that this would, in my opinion, would not be good enough to win. So I would rather not lose by 10 points on the board, but I would just go in here and stake my life on it. Or otherwise, if I think I'm really behind, which was the point I was trying to lead to, is that I would play this move and grab the 20 points, and then I would jump in. sort of like Chochkun, you know? And then I would live inside the moyo, and that would be my winning scenario. Grabbing the 20 points, and like this is not going to disappear. It's cast. And so if I can if black messes up at some point, and this is going to be a really complicated fight, it's very easy to make a mistake in the fight after black tries to surround the whole center. Then it could be giving me more chances to... So this is the move that I would play if I felt I was behind. And this is the move that maybe I would play if I thought it was a close game or maybe I had a slight lead.
Yeah.
I think AlphaGo thinks it's winning by half a point at this point.
Haskell?
One question.
Yes.
Whether AI or human, I'm not thinking, but is it a good move to play the shoulder hit, 11, E11?
That would be a safe move. But like and of course it would be fun because shoulder hits are in the fad right now. But its impact on the center is probably not much different from this side because like black's not going to get more than this line anyway because white has inroads from both sides. And so when the impact on the center is sort of similar, I think the loss on the side here, which white recurs, is probably bigger. So I wouldn't play the shoulder hit. All I can do is say that I wouldn't do it. You know, ask a computer, and you'll get different answers.
No, but actually, you won't get this explanation.
You don't get the explanation. You just get a move.
AlphaGo is a bit of a black box, so we prefer you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so white played this move, and so I really like this move. And when black pulled back here, it reduced the value of that and allowed white to play this one. Let's see.
This one here.
Which one? Oh yeah, the Atari, of course. Yeah, it plays them at the craziest points. Yes. And then I think black played here. No, black attacked first. Yeah, white jumped out. And then black pulled back, yeah. And then white played on the side, I guess. So these are all very big points. And they have to do with the potential fight in the center. So at this point, it's beginning to look relatively safe for white. And then there's this move, right? Okay, well, first of all...
How many people, before you saw this earlier, honestly now, right?
No.
Even Keith, come on, would you, not now, I'm talking about right now, later, right, but right now?
Yeah, I would be still worried about the connection to the center, but locally, I can see that move having two ways out. It would be something that you could look at, but yeah, I would be thinking I wasn't strong enough to play it yet.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because the timing is really interesting, right?
Well, that black group is not completely settled. And it looks like, I would be thinking of this move, to be honest.
Sure.
But it doesn't really turn out very well when black plays here.
Oh, right.
And white plays here, black plays here. And you can see that if white just goes straight for it, white's going to lose this command. And so that's not really working.
Right.
And black has a kind of semi-forcing hane here, which will be forcing if white does something towards this side. So it's not really working for white.
I would think of that, see it doesn't work, and then just sort of
I mean, this one isn't
move
working
on.
for white.
Right. This one.
And then if white pushes out, then black can connect underneath. And again, black gets this hane here. And this is really a problem for white when black does stuff like this. And this stone here is going to come in use because white covers and black is going to start a ko here. And black has some pretty big ko there. Like these two moves would be pretty devastating. So white can't afford to play the ko there. That ko would be bad for white, but white cannot allow black to connect up here also. So there's actually it's a kind of a problem for white when black does that. And so this is not working so well for white. And so how is this working? In this case, if black comes from the side, and this is again a very legitimate looking move. It looks like it could work. White's going to play the attachment here. So this ko is going to be, if black does something like this ko is relatively easy for white. It's going to be a ko that white is not going to lose so much by losing this call. It's just going to be local. So white can play some 2 moves towards the moyo, maybe jumping in here or maybe extending here would be a good co-threat. White could play a connection here, white has a co-threat here. And so the ko would be good for white. Black will play a hane on top, and now white connects. And black has this problem on the side here. White can extend liberty sometimes with this move, and all these cutting points. It's not going to work for black. So this is going to be bad for black. And so the attachment here, which was not working in this case because black has to connect underneath, it's working very well in this case when white has basically the 2 important points played already. And so this was kind of a surprise to me. The move that sort of springs to mind, this is the move that would work in a lot of positions. It's very similar to a 3-3 invasion when black has played the kick here. And so like you would envision this kind of thing happening, which would be good for white, but it's not happening in this case because black has this good move here. So it actually works, and then black plays here. So black's answer was correct. Like the first time I saw this, I didn't understand what was going on. So I'm not surprised that some people watching this are having trouble too. So this happened. So black is alive now. And white has really fixed up the shape here. It's good haji. So white has a connection here. White has something, looks like a potential connection to this side too. And it helps that white has this very solid shape here. And so let's see, white played here.
S14.
Yeah, that's
Oh, the extension? Yeah. Well, black covered. And then I think white must have
attached.
let's see. Yeah. And so did black play something before pulling back?
The hane.
E15, the hane, yeah. So this is threatening to curl around here. And white extends. Black crawls once. So now black has 4 liberties. And white only has 3. So black's going to win this by 1 move. So white answers here. And then black pulls back. White plays here. And so black plays here. White connects. And jumps. So yeah, this is where I thought the game was entering the endgame. And like if one side had a significant advantage, it probably would be very simple from here on. Like if black could afford to answer moves like this at any point, then it would be a very simple. Actually, there's not very many places to be playing after this. It's just they fixed the shape here. There's a big move on the upper side first. Let's see, black played here. White, I bet white played here right now.
D2.
E2, this one, D2. Yeah, this is forcing. It's still threatening to connect under here. So this is going to be very similar to what was happening before. It's going to be the same kind of thing as far as black's territory is concerned. But you can see that where that time white had this territory, this time this exchange here has reduced white's territory by about 2 points. So there's a big difference in the size of white's territory. Well, it's 2-point difference, which is why white did not answer immediately when it was about the same size as the center. But when white plays afterwards, it means that this move here is still worth about 20 points. About 20 points, yeah. Never mind the fine calculation. So it's going to be Sente when white plays it. And white played here. Yeah, and so this is where black played this one. Yeah. And so again, if white had a comfortable lead, white might have just played this one. Or white could have played this and then allowed black to capture the 1 stone. That would be another way to go about it. But this is actually fairly big. It gives these 3 black stones 2 extra liberties here. And that's significant when white does stuff inside here. And it gives black a very easy cutting stone here that black might be using later. And so there's a big difference in the potential black territory. And there's something like about 3 points difference in white's territory. So it adds up. And so if black gets to play that and then plays here, that would change the score of the game. It would be the added threat of cutting white off here would be sufficient to catch up to part of the move lost. So white ignores that, and white pulled back. And so now white's going to get into
Just
the
has
third.
been played.
Black has taken the one stone. Yeah. Yeah. And then again, black did not answer here. In this case, white would get a forcing honey here, and black's territory would be reduced. So black just pushes through, and then white attaches here. So this is where it gets really complicated. Black plays a honey here, and white plays the honey here. Oh, and then black plays here once, and pulls back, and then pushes through. So let's see, what else could black do? It's really dangerous for black in the center here. So that's why black is trying to capture this one stone. If white tries to escape with this stone, it looks dangerous because black can push through here and push through here. And it's not simple. But for the time being, if white pushes through to cut, and cuts. Now the white has 2 liberties, black has 3. So black's going to win that one. White can actually try to fix that by pushing through here. And if black cuts here, then white would be able to do this. Threatening, if black plays an Atari, it's going to be a snapback. So black has to probably connect here. So that's going to give white some extra liberty. White's going to push through and cut here. And then white can do stuff like this to extend liberty. So white's going to win this anyway. So that works for white. But actually, black's not going to cut there. Black's just going to make a connection in the center here. Allow white to do something to capture these 3 stones. And we can see the whole group here. Whatever black does. Black will probably just connect here. Black's going to be able to peep here and cut off this whole group. Actually, it could be, yeah, I think I'll have black just play here. White's not going to be saving the whole group. So good potential that black can just capture all this stuff, even though white gets something on the side. So maybe that's not so good for white.
Unless white had early dinner plans, possibly.
Okay, so we're like this. And so black pushes through here. And white just saves this side. So black is connected up, and white connects up with this move. And as I was saying, white is threatening to push through here and cut. And there's a jump here that could cut the whole thing off. And then eventually white can jump here to cut these stones off. So there's a lot of cutting points, and black protects that by connecting here. And if white were to continue on this, white can't really cut this side because it's a double threat here. Black can capture one of those 2. So if white cuts here, then black can always go after these 2 stones. And it's not as if black's going to die because black sort of has an eye here. Can play a forcing move here, or cut here, and black's going to get an eye there too. Yeah, so it's not really danger for black. So let's see, where did white play?
K8.
K8. So white played this one. So that's starting to get a connection in the center. And this is where black played here to capture those stones on the left, just sort of temporarily. And then this is where black cut once, I think. Yeah. So this move is actually, white can connect with Sente by playing here. So it seems really logical for white to be doing this. But there's a lot of drawbacks. First of all, black's getting some extra points here. And black will be able to take away white's eye here next. So this is going to be a false eye. So that's threatening the whole group. And the other thing is that black's already connected on the side, because if white jumps here, black can squeeze like this. And like it's on the first line, but it's in this case it's a pretty good first line connection.
Right.
because it has a lot of eyes.
You don't have to build
So black has all the eye space.
That's
and
cute.
It's really nice. And so white's eyeless and all of black's stones are connected, which makes a big difference. So white didn't do that. So instead of taking Sente or maybe playing an extra move to get rid of that threat at this point, it's better for white just to ignore that and keep these two stones safe and play this move, which is setting up the Atari Hereness, which is going to start to make some eye space. So let's see, go ahead. This is where it gets, black played this one, I think. Yeah, so this one is really interesting. Like if white plays some kind of Atari, then black can play this Atari, and this move here has become very bad. Like white plays here, we can have black play, just play here, I guess. And so that black gets a much better position in the center. So white didn't do that. White simply connected. And this exchange here, it allowed black to play here and bump against white to get a connected shape. So that made a big difference there. And again, if white cuts here, it's not working right now, because black can just push through, and white's whole centers. One of these groups is going to get, well, maybe all of them are getting cut off. Yeah. So white extends here. And is this where, let's see.
This is the extend of
This one?
Yeah. No, up here.
P14. Oh, this one, yeah, of course. And white connects. So white still has the some aji to play the Atari here.
Sure.
Oh yeah, so white played the Atari, of course. So this is setting up this eye, and also making this a forcing move, so that white has this forcing move here, threatening to push through here. And when black answers that, white has this Atari here, or actually white might play the Atari first. So white has this one eye here that can be made with these two forcing moves, and then an eye here. So that saves the white group, actually, playing this Atari. And black played the hanging connection. White played the capture, and then curled around. And so white is actually, white knows that it can live in the center. And so it's playing these moves to reduce black on the right side. So actually, yeah. So at this point, black did not play the hanging. Black played here once, right?
Yeah.
And then white jumped. And I think black actually continued here.
Sorry.
Oh, you're going in the wrong direction, Chris. And here.
Tell me something I don't.
At least you're still in the main line.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm staying on the main line.
Oh, that's something else that could happen, yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at this point, white's making a threat. Go ahead. 10 more moves. I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So black is surrounding white, and white pushes through here. So the threat behind this move is that next, when white has cut black off here, if we just look at the left side here, white can push through here, and black gets a connection on the first line. But black doesn't have eye space, so if we assume that one, and this one, and this one, you can see that black's not really alive. So that's a potential trouble for black. And you know, white might have to be careful and play moves like this first, just to make things safe. But if white does it in the correct order, white's going to be okay with the potential move here and potential problems here. And actually, if you look at it, if there's a white stone here, it's going to be bad stuff happening to black on this side too, with the throw in here. So that's why it's working for white. White has to be careful of the connection here, because there's kind of a wedge somewhere. But this move is, when I look at it now, it's actually forcing. So black answered that here. And the reason black didn't push through here is that would make a drastic change in what's happening on the right side. Because once white gets to cut here, that's filled a liberty. And so now if black backs up here, white's going to push through here, sort of endangering these three stones. But it doesn't matter, because white gets to squeeze first. And so taking those 3 stones will just create a dead shape.
Got
So that would
it.
be a disaster for black. So black cannot push through here once. Even though black's connected, it'd just be capturing the 3 stones would not give black. So black has to keep that one open. So black answers here. And this is creating that code that happened at the end of the game. So black is getting something back. And then let's see, where did white play? White played this one, right? So this is just a big territorial move, but it does change how things are going to turn out later. The black plays here. So black is perfectly alive. Black has a forcing move here. And if black starts with this one, black's going to get a Sente here. Of course, in actual practice, white's not going to save these stones yet. But then black has this Sente on the side. Well, it's already established, but this eye here. So it's very easy for black to live. The point is that white is creating this move, which will threaten these stones, and it gives white some extra value on that side. Because white knows that it can live when black plays this. White has this sequence where it can live in the center, but it starts with this move. Just because if white had lived first, this exchange, it's perfectly alive. But then if white decides to attack next, black's just going to skip answering it. And going to play this defensive move. Oh, sorry, the connection here is already on the board. Black's just going to play this defensive move here. And the effect on the left side here is going to be limited. So white, before white makes the eyes with this sequence here, white plays this forcing move. And at this point, black wants to force white to play the 2-point move here. So black has to push through here. And then white makes the line. And here. And I think this is where black played the throwing. Did white take it, or it doesn't really matter. And then let's see, black played the biggest move on the board, which is this one. You're going in the wrong direction again.
Where I can check.
You're good? Another 10 moves? At least?
At least, okay. All right, testing.
Okay, go.
You keep it up?
You keep on going, 10 more moves? Yeah. There's probably a button you can press for 10 moves. Oh yeah, white connected. Okay. And so this is where white played the attachment here. And so again, we see that white is putting pressure on this black group. But this time, because white played this exchange first, it's closer to the black territory. So there's more that white is going to gain there. Black push through. White push through here. Black played here. White cuts here. And so there's just a couple of points here where white is sort of edged into the black territory. And black has to go back to. And then let's see, white's going to play a big move. Where did white play? White played the extension here. This Atari here. And this is a big move because next black's going to play here. And that's going to take away white's eyes in the corner. And black has a potential cut here. So it's really dangerous. So locally, if white plays here, it's easy for black. Black just connects up on the side. That's a big territorial difference. If white plays here, black has the ko here. And I haven't actually counted the ko threats, but black does have some really big ko threats here. And it's going to be killing the whole white group when black wins the ko and then pushes through here. So it's a very dangerous ko for white. So I would assume it's bad for white. So white doesn't really have a good answer to this. So that's why white played here. And it's going to link into all of the stuff that happened in this area next, after the ko. The white ko threat that turned this area into a seki. White's already preparing for it. There's a connection to that by filling a black liberty here. It's going to make a difference. I wouldn't be surprised if AlphaGo had that calculated. And so black starts the ko, I believe. I'm going to need the moves here when they play ko threats, but I'm pretty sure black started with that ko threat in that corner. Yeah, go ahead. 10 more moves.
Well,
He's got a question.
the value of Ko, I mean, he ends up getting, the Seki feels bigger than the Ko was.
The Ko is pretty big. Like that's 14 points. Like this, it turns into this territory. So you have 5 white stones.
14,
Yeah, so counting up to this point is 14 points. And actually, if you assume that black is going to play this, as black did in the game, you have to count this stone, this point too. It's 15 points. So it's a difference of 15 points. Partly because white has actually played the Ko. It's a bit smaller if white hadn't done that. But it's 15 points. It's really big at this point in the game. And black's loss here was just, it was less than 10 points.
Okay.
So it's harder to calculate, but it's less than 10 points. So it's worth it. And the interesting thing is that white actually allowed black to do that. But as I saw, the threat here is very strong. So I guess it makes sense. And there is so 15 points here is bigger than anything else on the board, even though black did play this move that lost a couple of points here, compared to the normal endgame move, which would be this one. And that was a 5 point. If black plays here, it's 5 points for white in the corner. This would usually be 7 points, so it's a 2 point difference for white's territory. But there is a kind of a lurking potential that this whole thing is going to turn into a 3-stone nakade and die at some point. So there's a lot of doing that black has to, like, it has to do with maybe this is going to be big enough for white to connect here, in which case black would be able to cut white off. And so there's a lot of conditions. Black has to do something about this eye. But we're going to see in the game, this eye is going to disappear, actually. And so there's a little issue here, which is going to have to do, like, the point is that if black just pushes through, white can still get an eye on the left here by sacrificing the 2 stones. So it's not as if white's really in danger of getting killed, but white is in danger of losing a few points when black does something like this. So there's some potential, but almost always, and when I say almost always, AlphaGo will find a way to make that not quite true, but almost always it's a 2 point loss. So there's a 2 point loss that's degrading the value of this Ko, but even so, it's the biggest move. So now I really need you to show me the move, because the order of the Ko threats doesn't make any difference. And so it's much easier for me to make mistakes. It doesn't really matter in a way, because they're all this. Oh, I think white started with this Ko threat actually. Yeah, and took the Ko, and I think black probably started with this Ko threat. Yeah, and white takes. Yeah, white played this Ko threat. We're getting some border here. Yeah, I better put my phone away.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the board needed watering. Okay.
The stones are crying.
They're crying, yeah. Okay, where was I?
Where are we? Wait. So
that was sort of
did we play the one in the corner, right? Did we play this?
White takes the
Oh yeah, black pushed through here.
Yeah.
That was a
There
Ko
you go,
threat.
that's Ko
But
threat.
where did white play before
back
that? I
up,
think
right
I've already
there.
done the white Ko threat and I forgot to take the Ko back, yeah. So black pushed through here,
Yeah.
and white crawls.
Right.
Black takes.
Right.
Let's see, white's Ko threat would be
This one.
X at L2.
this one, yeah.
Yep.
And black still has Ko threats, like I think black might have pushed through here.
We have a roof leak here.
Looks like we do.
It's never leaked there before.
Well, it's sort of stopped now.
Keep an eye on it.
All right, go ahead.
All right,
Chris.
we're good. You got the push. You got this. We're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it right.
Oh.
Yeah. So up to this point, it was forcing for white. White is sort of running out of Ko threats too. I think black pushed through here. Oh, black cut. So black used this one. And so this is a good point for black to quit the Ko, partly because black still has Ko threats, but they're all bad. Like black has a Ko threat. This would be about 10 points. It might not be big enough, actually. It's probably not big enough.
Wow.
Because white gets some extra value with the potential cut here and the crawl here. And the fact that winning the ko actually, there's some extra profit here with the cut. It's a bit of a squeeze. And so black doesn't, this one is not a valid ko threat. Black has a ko threat here, which is losing all of the potential in the corner. And black doesn't really want to play this one either, because this is going to make it easy for white to play this move. And this has to do with the potential I here. And the potential, when white does this, as white did late in the game, there's this move that takes the corner, turns the corner into just a one eye with Sente. Black can play this to make it a one eye shape. This is a valid ko threat, but it's a ko threat that black doesn't really want to play. And white actually has a ko threat here, which is obviously a bad exchange. So white's not going to play that one. So white just plays this one. And so this is a good time for black to quit the ko. So black quits the ko, white connects. And you know, I had fun with this variation. Oh, I don't think I actually left it in this yet. So this would be another ko. But white needs a lot of ko threats. Like black can actually take the ko once and then back off here and play here. And then white's still going to need a lot of ko threats. Let's see, which way should white do? White's still going to need a lot of ko threats because white's really short of liberties in the whole group. And so it's going to be a ko again. White doesn't have time to connect the ko because black would just squeeze from this side, and white wouldn't have enough. Oh, let's just do it. Yeah, let's just do it. Just to show that I'm not tricking you guys. And then black would just play some random sequence, like this would work. And white has 3 liberties left, black has 3, so black's going to win by 1 move. And so that was simple, right?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. I was way ahead of you on that. I'm behind over here, but I totally had you there.
And so this would be a ko where white would have to be playing here or filling from the outside, something like that, and white would need a lot of ko threats to win this ko. White's just about out of ko threats anyway, so it would not work. So white connects here, and then black captures the stone. And this is where white played the Atari here. And so it's sort of interesting because white had an opportunity to capture these 4 black stones, but it's not good. Like that gives black 4 points of territory here, and white has to use a move to capture this. Actually, crawling here or taking the stone would be bigger than that, or even playing the honey here. White has a lot of moves that are more important than capturing these 2 stones. So it's better for white to play here, see what black does. Like if black backs off, white's getting more points this way. And when this happens, white gets the seki. And at this moment, it's already a seki. And white is threatening to do this next and start a ko here. So this would be very, very dangerous for black. Black cannot connect on the first line because white would play an Atari from this side. So there's danger there for black. So that's why black added a stone here. And this will make it possible for black to fill this liberty now. So so this stone is not on the board now. Sorry, that was from some other semi-I. Yeah.
It's so many semi-I, so little time.
That. Yeah, that's not supposed to be on the board. So when black plays here, now this is sort of in limbo, because if white plays here, it's going to be a seki. If black plays something first, it's going to be a win for black. So that's a potential 4 points for black. But there's -1 point for the stone that black put in here. And so it's going to be a potential 3 points because black put a stone in on this side.
So this is sort of an...
So it's better for white to leave black with the potential 3 points than to give a position where black already has 4 points and white hasn't taken the reward yet, you might say. In fact, if black plays here, this is going to be sort of forcing for black, because black's threatening an Atari here, which is pretty effective.
But I hear you talking a lot about 2 points and 3 points and 2 points and 3 points. And at this point in the game, it's really complicated in terms of the counting, right? I mean, it's and you have potential disaster lurking around.
At this point of the game, a top professional would probably be able to read out this. Like this is the reason I say this is a game that's really good if you want to study the end game, is that after this point, it becomes fairly straightforward, but you also have a lot of relatively big moves. Like this move here is usually 6 points, and you get to think about the extra that white gets. Like, there's an extra value to this move. It's usually just what we would call 6 points, a difference of 6 points. But then when white plays this move, which is smaller than that, but it's going to come fairly soon, there's the added value that this is always Sente for white. And that's a fraction of a point. So if people who like to calculate that will have fun figuring out how big the difference is when white has that forcing move for sure. So it's slightly more than 6 points. And then there's this move, and that's going to be, it's usually a 6 point move. It has to do with the value of, it's slightly less than 6 points actually, because we can say that this is going to be safely white's forcing move. And black's territory, 4 points of black's territory disappeared already. And if this one was forcing, then white would have 2 points extra here. But this one is not going to be forcing. And so there's all this, a fraction of a point less than 6 points. So and you don't really have to be that exact, but it's a point where you can say that, yeah, and this one is obviously, if you put that on the board, it's pretty easy to see that this is 3 points in difference. And then, let's see, what's on this one, if we have white do the squeeze, that's all of these black points. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black points, and then the 1 white point disappears when black plays the Atari. So that's a 6 point. So let's see what order the, obviously AlphaGo is going to play it in the correct order.
Question?
Yes.
Just in general, you make the statement that a top professional will be able to read the end game precisely at some point.
Yes.
And AlphaGo obviously can do that at some point. How does that relate to the point in the game where you declared the game in endgame now, but AlphaGo declared in the opinion?
Well, AlphaGo games are a bit special in that because, as we saw in this game, you think the game is in the endgame, and then all sorts of fights break out. And that happens in probably a majority of the games in this 50-game set. And it's not what happens in a human professional game, because usually one side or the other has an idea that he's going to win, he or she is going to win. And they don't opt for the life or death fights that are happening in these AlphaGo games. And they're very tactically difficult. Like, it would be very easy for a top professional player to mess up somewhere in the middle of this fight. And it's very dangerous because of that. So instead of playing what might be the optimal move, and which in this game, which I think it must have been, I get the feeling it was very close, and so I'm assuming it could have been half a point for a long time. It meant that AlphaGo had to find the most effective moves, because what a human player might call safe moves would just lose the game for AlphaGo.
But does it come down to the...
But actually this point is a point where we're in what humans would call small endgame. Like the biggest one is about 6 points. And so that's relatively...
It's a fraction more or a fraction less than 6 points.
It's a fraction more or less, which is... it's pretty easy for a pro to see that.
Right.
And, well, you could get into counting systems. There's different counting systems that are more exact. But it doesn't matter.
But you're
does it come down to the notion that the AI, this AlphaGo anyway, is looking for the best percentage chance to win?
Right. It's not looking for the biggest one.
Okay.
It's looking for a safe one.
That's the difference.
And that's the big difference. But in a case where it's only going to win by half a point or a quarter of a stone, because it is the Chinese rule, that's equal to the best, what a human would call the best. So it's a rare case actually, because I think there are a lot of cases, even in this 50-game series, where there are 1 or 2 more points that one side was winning by. And that's where I was seeing what I was calling mistakes. But as far as AlphaGo is concerned, if it's winning by 2.5 points, those 2 points are extras that it can give away. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care whether it wins by half a point or 100 points. Yes?
Do you think it's fair to say maybe it's thinking it's winning maybe 50 moves before?
Well, it's constantly evaluating the game.
Right.
And at this stage of the game, it would, even if it was winning by half a point, it would approach 99%. It would be approaching 100%, just because the game it could be more sure of what's going to happen. So at this point, if it was a half point, it is a half point difference. The end game is actually workable for a human pro at this point. But it is a half point. A human player would be still very nervous because humans even top pros are capable of making a mistake that loses a fraction of a point, this hypothetical fraction of a point can add up. If you're unlucky, it can turn into a real point. Like we don't count, we don't make parts of points in the actual game, but a mistake that is calculated to be a fraction of a point can sometimes, depending on the number of co-threats, or it usually involves a co somehow, it can turn out to be a 1 point loss. It's just it only turns out that way if it's a third of a point. If I call it a third of a point, it's going to turn out to be a 1 point loss in maybe one of 3 cases. So it's a lower percentage. And then I could talk about a sixth of a point, stuff like that. It's the same thing. There's the possibility of that actually materializing into a point loss. But it happens.
No, I think the point that you were making earlier, which is that even the strongest players, can make mistakes.
Yeah,
even though they're very tiny mistakes.
Yeah, they're tiny mistakes.
Right,
they can
but
be
the
very
computer, the AI is not doing that.
It's not doing that, and it doesn't need. Well, it doesn't do that if it's winning by half a point.
Right.
If it's winning by 2.5 points, it doesn't care. Those aren't losing.
They can calculate those, and it can continually. I mean, this is we saw this with Lisa Dahl, right? I mean, when we're going over these games, right? I mean, we've been doing this for a while now, right? And you're talking about really, really complicated stuff, and our brains are tired, and even a professional is going to be tired, and make it difficult. It's not a factor with the AI,
That's right.
And that to me is sort of one of the most interesting and cool things when you think about other uses for AI, where that would be really useful. But here is just sort of that's a factor. We all know this in human games. You can be playing a stronger player. If that stronger player gets tired or pissed off, or any of those things that can happen to human beings, things can happen. It's not going to happen with the AI.
Yeah, that's the danger with humans. But also, I wouldn't want this giving away of points really bothers me.
It really does.
I wouldn't want a computer like that doing my teeth or something.
Right.
It goes back for me to the AlphaGo match against Lee Sedol, which of course AlphaGo won brilliantly. But in human terms, how much of Lee Sedol's strength was his opponent usually was afraid he was playing Lee Sedol. I mean, I think that's a palpable thing.
Well, yeah, he wasn't.
You combine that with the human being tired and the pressure on the human, and AlphaGo not feeling pressure. I mean, clearly these versions are stronger than the best human, but I wonder whether the AlphaGo against Lee Sedol was actually stronger purely than Lee Sedol, or those other limitations played a factor.
Very, very much so. Lee Sedol was being put under a lot of pressure, and there was more media there than any Go player had ever seen before. And they weren't, the thing that bothered me most was that most of them didn't know anything about Go at all. And they were just sitting there watching me do my commentary and not understanding a word of what I said. And we tried to simplify it, but the game was just going so quickly, we couldn't do it really. And so it was really very strange. It was worse than those first graders when they weren't catching on.
So in other words, EJ is the best medium out there, right?
Oh, absolutely. He said that e-journal is the best medium out there. That is true. And it's accurate, too.
And there's also the fact that AlphaGo, it plays these weird moves when it doesn't matter. And yes, the AlphaGo that played Lee Sedol was weaker. And it wasn't so exciting because it was still at the stage where I would say it was sort of imitating humans. It was playing openings that were very similar to the openings that it had incorporated into its what.
Well, because it had trained on them.
It had trained on them, and it was still playing the same moves. It was playing Chinese opening and stuff like that. It had moves that it liked to play, which were exactly the same moves that humans like to play. It hadn't moved on from that point. And so it was recognizable. And it was playing slack moves when it thought it was winning. And Lisadal probably didn't realize that he was losing at that point. I wasn't realizing that Lisadal was completely lost. I thought the game was still in balance. And AlphaGo was playing slack moves because it thought it was winning. So as the game approached the end, AlphaGo was getting stronger and stronger. And so towards the end of the game, when the game was, in a human game it would be seesawing, AlphaGo was getting more and more accurate. So that was the very, very frustrating part of it for Lisadal, I think, because he was looking at some moves that just looked bad to the human eye. And when you see that, you sort of, and yeah, then there was that word Teskey, the bad way the guy didn't really have a very good way of putting the stones down.
It's worth talking about. No, it's worth talking about because it really bothered, and Michael talked
and
about
it. And that looks weak. You know, it sort of sends a signal to your brain that this guy is no good. Because
which may have been
with
totally
Go,
subconscious.
You can tell how strong someone is just by the way they handle the stone.
And
it tells you a lot.
distracts. I always say that, you know, when we play in our matches, you use the same hand on the clock as to place the stone. And if you're playing with 2 hours per player in the U.S. Open, it doesn't really matter. And yet when your opponent does it, for a moment you're like, he did that wrong.
Well, tell him that we're as a game commentator that we're going to do at some point, maybe hopefully this weekend, on this really cool
the
Amazing tournament.
Yeah, the Amazing title match.
Which Michael did English game commentary.
I did the English commentary.
That was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
But he was telling a story which he didn't tell in that commentary. There's a picture, if you notice, of when the first move is played, to your point, really just gorgeously stylistically. One of the things that Michael pointed out, you should tell the story.
The left-handed, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Yama plays Go with his left hand, but he's actually was not left-handed. He was right-handed, and his parents had the idea that it would be good for his brain to use the other side of his brain, maybe to do something with his left hand. At that point, they weren't imagining that he would become a top Go player, but they just thought he had to do something with his left hand, and it would help his development.
It seems very out of the box Japanese thinking.
I think you'll like this. I think it's a baseball thing, you know. Yama, you know, he's right-handed, but he plays Go left-handed, you know.
And it turns out
it worked out pretty well.
The way he plays with the stones, he's one of the most beautiful.
Oh, gorgeous! I mean, go back and look at that picture. Pull that picture up. I mean, it is with the fingers. I mean, it is. And I know he's doing it for
slow. He sort of savors it. And he has a very nice way of putting the stone down.
But to your point, back to the AI, that I think your argument, and the more that I've thought about it.
So I think that Isel would have done better if he had a professional player doing that, what the operator was doing.
That simple.
It would have made a big difference. It's just a subconscious message that he's getting, that this guy's a lousy Go player, he's an amateur. And then these moves that looked slack in the late middle game, where it turns out AlphaGo was already seeing that it was going to win, they also send that message. And like when you're playing a weaker player, it's like one person in several thousand or tens of thousand people will get stronger towards the end of the game. That's where weaker players tend to be weaker. And professionals are pretty good at the end of the game. It's the one part of the game that we can figure out completely. Like I can solve this end game. And I'll be reasonably confident that I have it correct to one point. And so I actually did that with this endgame.
So, Mr. Redmond, I was cogitating on this. I think unless I heard you wrong, one of the statements you made was that AlphaGo was making moves not practical for humans.
They were, yes, well.
And if we are supposed to be nowadays use AlphaGo AI as sort of our coach in learning Go, but if they are making moves not practical
yet
for humans,
yeah, well, they're not practical for me right now, And that doesn't mean I'm not going to try playing them and try to figure out how I'm going to use them. So maybe I'm going to feel differently. That humans change. Like AlphaGo in the least adult version, it's not going to change forever. That's something about it. But humans can catch up to a certain degree, and we can play with the idea. Like in the Meijin tournament game, you're going to see a brand new variation of that 3-3 invasion, and that's the way humans get stronger. They play around with the idea. They try out something different, and eventually they find something they like, or they're willing to stake a professional tournament game on. And so I'm not at that point at this right now, and that's why I say AlphaGo is playing moves that I don't feel are practical for them. But that doesn't mean they're going to be impractical indefinitely.
But he's talked about the tension. Well, he's talking about there's a tension. Even tonight, he's talked about this tension. He said two different things, right? He's talked about, playing the moves that are in your comfort level because you're going to know where to go with it. That's true. But he's also saying that there are these moves in every game we play. There's at least one, sometimes many of them that you don't understand,
and they're outside.
And he loves these moves.
Yeah,
and the struggle that he's had. He's still a professional. He's still playing professional, and he's talked about this in some of his commentaries, where Michael's struggle, having studied these games so deeply, is that this has happened in several of his games recently, right? Where he finds basically AlphaGo moves that he doesn't.
I'm not going to play them sometimes.
Yeah, well, you're trying to decide whether to play them. It's this sort of tension within himself as to, is he comfortable with that?
Well, as a professional, I think that I have to choose whether I really want to continue from that position. Like I'm not going to be able to ask AlphaGo what the next move is.
So with the capability of AlphaGo, AI being far ahead of human beings, right?
Especially zero.
As of now. That is there a way for us humans to determine whether there is a flaw or there's a mistake?
We can't judge AlphaGo at this point. It's beyond us. Like there's these things I'm talking about in the end game. They're definitely not correct from the human perspective. And if a human played moves that lose points, that player is probably going to play another move that lose points and go too far and lose the half-point game. So they're not really practical. But it is practical in a game like this, which is actually a half-point difference, and AlphaGo is sort of forced to play the correct moves, you might say. And so there are points where I'm finding moves that would definitely be incorrect for a human to play. But then there's these opening moves that are really, really interesting. But we don't really know how they're working. And people have mixed results with the 3-3 invasions.
But I also
they have
think,
mixed results when they play different.
And when you're talking about correct and incorrect, how do you, oftentimes, and we've seen this even in human study of Joseki, something starts out as incorrect, and then people...
Joseki is a level, in the opening of the game, to be brutally honest, no one knows what they're doing. And I don't think even AlphaGo has a final answer.
Right.
When I say AlphaGo, in general, all of the programs that play, they're still making progress, they're still changing. And as they regenerate, they come up with different moves. And so they haven't come to a final answer. They're just playing moves that they think they have a good potential to win. They're not finishing the game.
Right. So the correct, incorrect ideas maybe...
It's very fuzzy.
Very fuzzy. Yeah, that's a good word.
Presumably for amateurs, we've got the same phenomenon. We're trying to play pro-like moves.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you don't even
don't
know
try
if
this
they're
at home,
correcting.
kids. but we have the same thing, which is, if you really want to get better, you probably should try the things that you don't know how to do, and you're probably going to crash and burn. That goes back to something you said earlier. It's, as long as you can learn from that, is good. If you keep crashing and burning, then you may want to get back to your comfort zone, right? It's that lose too much, and that's no fun, right? So,
and the other question is, will you be able to understand what you did wrong?
Right.
And so you have to be able to get something out of it.
Luckily,
so that's the learning experience that Go can help you.
And
so
also
that's where
you
coaching from a computer would help, because you would just show it the game, and it would give you a different move than you played, maybe a bit later in the game, and then you'd be able to try that. And so by you could just actually do the whole thing on the computer and just find moves that it liked, and then create your own sequence up to a point where you felt more comfortable with it. And so that's the way that pros are actually using these AIs. They're creating a sequence that the computer likes and the professional, the human professional, likes to a certain extent also. And they're going to work with that. And they're gonna, but the way we study the game is slightly different. So that's just the starting point for human beings. We have to play around with the idea of it to really understand it. Because copying someone good is not what professionals are supposed to do. We have to understand it completely.
But until then, you can ask Michael.
He's been wanting to ask a question for a while.
Should we let
So speaking of analysts and pros, but for amateurs, do you suggest we play the moves that are supposed to be the best, or just the comfortable moves?
I think if you're an amateur, you have, like, if you're a pro and you're playing a tournament game, the most important thing is to feel that you can win the game. And so the results are very important, like that. That's our livelihood. And so although we would want to experiment with something sometimes it's just not going to have a good percentage result for us personally, even if it has a good result for the computer. And so we have to make that decision. I think you have more freedom when you're not playing for your livelihood. It's an amateur thing. You should just do what you want. That's what Takamiya says. Do what you want to do, and then figure out what was wrong about it, and then you're going to learn something. But it's okay to copy the moves if you figure out where you went wrong later on. And in my case, I try to have my own opinion before I ask a computer program, because then I get to see where it differs and where maybe I made a mistake.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you said that you use that approach.
If you look at the answer first, then you get sort of brainwashed.
There was a kibitz of a game everyone was watching on KGS, and someone started saying Leela thinks it's 57% for white, and I chimed in and said, you can do that anytime. Mm-hmm. Now's the time for us to say what we think the position is. Now, by all means, I'm not saying I'm against using Leela, but right now, it's like you're giving away the ending. Mm-hmm. Not that we were at the end at that point, but...
Well, 57 is not very big. It's like...
Well, that's misuse of the tool as well.
And Leela,
the bigger point,
Leela gives higher percentages than Zen did.
Right.
I'm most familiar with Zen.
I don't remember which one was actually being used. But
57.
The bigger point is your point, which is that if you're just using this tool to come up with an answer, whether or not the answer is correct or not, it's a different issue. Then you're not doing yourself any good.
Yeah, you're just using the computer to play Go for you.
Right. And then, you could go eat or something. We're getting low on time, so I wanted to, we can do some more questions, or, because this goes on for a while, as I recall.
It's a straightforward end game. Yeah. I think we can leave it here.
Yeah, I think so.
It's already half a point.
Yeah.
I'm confident of that.
But I did want to put
It's one of the rare cases where I'm confident of it.
He's always confident until he goes back and re-looks at it, and then he comes up with...
Well, this one is a half point. Yeah.
Okay.
I worked out that game.
But since we don't have AlphaGo, but we do have Michael, who I have 100% confidence can tell you what mistakes you made or what could have done better. On Sunday, 11 o'clock here, bagels, yes?
Bagels provided.
Bagels provided.
Brunch,
yeah. So bring your... you don't
the tournament tomorrow.
Right. Oh, yeah. Can you talk about the tournament? What time?
Show up at 8:30.
Okay.
Doors 8:30. Who is coming tomorrow who hasn't registered or pre-registered? Anyone?
Good.
I might, but I won't be there at the first round.
Okay. Jeff, are you coming?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have you registered. Edward.
Yeah.
You should come. You should play tomorrow.
I have two.
We need some more hired guns. You should come.
So let's just come back to that in just a second. Let's just take one or two more questions, and then we can wrap here so Jeff can finish this. So go ahead, and then John. Okay, or a comment.
So this was done on a Chinese, so it's a 7.5 komi, right?
7.5 komi,
so,
as we would call it, and it is Chinese rules. 3 3/4 points.
So, again, black and white, who has the higher winning percentage?
White.
White. Even if the 7.5. 7.5, the white is more.
Obviously.
Okay.
But I think most of the computer programs are saying that 6.5, 5.5 is still too big. I think that they seem to be pretty low in the Komi, so 4.5 or something. But there's very few that actually calculate on points. Like there's, of course, Zen, which is not as strong as the top programs anymore. Zen allows you to choose the size of the Komi. And so it actually differentiates between different sizes of points. It can evaluate the game with a different Komi. But most of the programs are just stuck on 7.5 points and Chinese rules, which does make differences.
Yeah.
There is, I think is it the Hong Kong, I forget which program it is. There's a program that can give you a point score at a given point in the game. But it's not one of the ones that is freely available. It's one of the ones I think it's Go actually, that's right. It can actually calculate how many points you lost in a certain trade. So it says Black lost a point or two here, and it can give you an exact number. And it can give you the score, I think. So that's a program that would be able to do that. But that's completely different logarithm. It's a different calculation than the neural networks we're doing with AlphaGo. So it's something completely separate that they've added on, I suppose.
John and then Edward.
I was just, when we were talking about the fractional points for a lead, presumably the computers know which case we're in, that we're in the, whether they're round up or round down.
It probably reads, you might say it reads the whole endgame out. It probably doesn't even have to do those calculations, which are, they're approximations anyway. And like humans just use them to simplify our calculation of endgame moves. Like it becomes relatively obvious to me that if this is a fraction of a point, more than 6 points, and this is a fraction of a point, I know which order I want to play the moves. And then there's this 6-point move that's in between, and so they're calculatable. And it works pretty well with the moves that are 5 or 6 points. But then when you get close to the end of the game, there's a final move that one side or the other plays. And that's going to make usually a 1-point difference. And depending on how you played these bigger moves, the order can change, especially when some of them have follow-up moves that average out the value of the move somehow, but it changes the tempo of the game. And so the final move can come to one player or the other, depending on how you play out the end game. And it can make usually a 1-point difference. In some cases, it could be more.
Edward?
Oh, I know. Question, can you teach us more about maybe the attachment move? Because it seemed to me AlphaGo or AI looks like they use more attachment moves more than human players.
Well,
like
that's a big subject.
That's a whole other subject. We might do a lesson on that.
M7 move, for example. They seem really nice.
That's
okay.
not now.
Good.
Ken?
Maybe a quick question is that.
Oh, this attachment is very much more different than. I could say, to put it shortly, I would say that AIs like to play more active moves, more forcing moves. And so moves that the opponent has to answer locally, because AIs do like to play away, and they also like to play forcing moves. So in a way, they play moves that were originally considered vulgar a lot, because they're forcing and they keep the tempo, they keep Sente. So they like to play forcing moves, and moves like capping moves or even shoulder hits, which computers do play. But moves like that are a space away are not always forcing, whereas with an attaching move, it makes it easier, I think, for the computer to calculate what's going to happen, because it's more forcing. And we're finding a lot of those moves are actually more effective from the human vantage point also.
Okay. So it sounds like for amateur, we maybe want to try more attachment. Would you agree?
You have to read out the local position. It takes some reading ability. It's a much more tactically complicated position.
Okay.
Yeah, the strategy of the early 3-3 invasion against the start point, and then leaving the resulting outside wall as a target for attack, seems to be pretty effective. What about Tanuki at that point? If you are on the 4-4 point, then it reverts to a shoulder hit against the 3-3 stone.
That has been done.
It has,
It has been done by, at some point, it was done by some of the computer programs, and
like
it
it?
has been done by human professional Go players. It does just revert to the other joseki where one side has played a 3-3 point and others, and computer programs will play that shoulder hit against a 3-3 point. And so that has happened, and has been done. It depends on the whole board's position.
Right.
You have to have something that is more important.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually not so often. Usually that area is important enough for black to at least play it to this position and get this far. And so this is actually this position here where black has played up to the white honey on the second line. Right now this is viewed as a good point in the joseki where black can play away. And I wouldn't be surprised if this evaluation of the local position is going to last. Like things change, but this is a reasonable point in the game where black can play away. And as you saw in this game, white played this continuation, which is probably the best local move for white. It gets rid of all the problems with the cutting points, and it opens up the side here, making this a relatively weak group. So it's a very big move. There was a point where white was trying stuff like this, and this was in some of the AlphaGo games too, I believe. At least it was in some computer games. I don't have a clear record. This is faded out. It's disappeared, and it's really very close evaluation, but it looks like it's playable for black. Oh yes, it was in the AlphaGo game.
It was.
Yeah. And so that sort of disappeared now. And as I say, the most modern computer programs are said to be about the same level as master. So they're at least the same. If they're the same level, they can judge that, I suppose. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming and for your attention, and especially thank you to Michael once again, as always.
I always enjoy it.